What's up, Patriot fans? Welcome to another draft preview here on YouTube. I am Mike Dussault, joined by Paul Perillo from Patriots.com. And Paul, today we are talking about a position that everybody loves to talk about. And now with Julian Edelman retiring, maybe even a little bit more so, the wide receivers. Great class up at the top, few great prospects. How are things kind of shaking out for you and what you see from these guys?
Yeah, it's a good group. And this is going on, 2, 3, 4 years in a row now. Pretty strong group, a lot of draftable receivers, a lot of guys that people think are, top 2 days, good productive receivers. And that's the thing we've seen, Mike, over the last few years is you don't necessarily have to get the number one guy in the class, the number 2 guy in the class. You can get production from the second round, third round, Deebo Samuel, Terry McLaurin, all kinds of examples of guys taken a little bit later on that have been really productive players really immediately. And that wasn't always the case. Wide receiver used to be a spot, Mike, that it took you a couple of years to really get settled into the NFL. But now with the advent of all the spread offenses in college, and in turn, some of those offenses now being implemented in the NFL, I think it's making the transition a little bit easier for these guys.
So things have to start up top with LSU's Jamar Chase. I mean, he was, dynamic a couple years ago. He seems like off his pro day, he's right back at the top. And then he's joined by the 2 guys from Alabama.
Yeah, I like all of these guys. And Devonta Smith is a kid that, produced for 4 years at Alabama and waited his turn. Obviously got the big boost in production because of the injury to his teammate, Jalen Waddle, who was also an excellent player at Alabama. Just think about it, Mike, 2 years ago. Henry Ruggs, Jerry Jeudy, Jalen Waddle, and Devonta Smith, all as part of the same wide receiver corps at the best program in the country in Alabama. So, yeah, I think all 3 of these guys, Chase would be my choice. I think he's got the size, the ball skills, the toughness. I think the speed. I thought he ran an impressive 40 at the pro day, and he wasn't necessarily considered one of the burners, like Ruggs last year. Well, he ran like that at his pro day, so I think he might be the top one off the board.
Then those 2 Alabama guys, I mean, it seems like the Patriots are kind of no man's land there at 15 with these guys. I mean, maybe not a chance for those top 3, but then as you start to get down a little bit, guys like Kadarius Toney, Rashod Bateman, Elijah Moore, another one that we like, those guys start to come into play. It seems like, the Patriots might miss out on a couple of these guys, but maybe day 2 is where they can really find some value.
That's what I'm expecting, Mike, maybe a second, third round, one of these guys. And I think the big question will be some of the guys you mentioned, Moore would be one of them, more slot kind of guys. And, do you look to replace the retirement, Julian Edelman's retirement? Do you look to replace that specific role? Or do you go and say, we missed a couple of years ago in N'Keal Harry and an outside guy. Let's see if we can get another one. Maybe Bateman that you mentioned would be, a possibility. Nico Collins, a kid from Michigan, some of the other bigger receivers. But I think there's a lot to choose from with both, both skill sets.
A couple of those second day guys to talk about too. I mean, we've talked about him a lot over the last couple months. Rondale Moore, who, another one of those slot guys, undersized, but a dynamic playmaker, just somebody who, when he's on the field is able to make a ton of plays. Certainly some risks with these guys, but it's amazing how much speed there is still to be had there on day 2.
Yeah, and Toney, you brought up Kadarius Toney, and, I think Kyle Pitts, rightly so, gets a lot of the attention there in that offense. But Toney really had a strong year, and I think, you see some explosiveness in his game. Moore is another one that absolutely the Tyreek Hill comparisons with him. He's a smaller guy. I think during the week on our Patriots Unfiltered shows, you mentioned that maybe Hill has a little bit more thickness to him, a little bit stouter in his frame, and I agree with you. I think Moore looks smaller, even though the height's probably not that big of a difference. He looks smaller than Hill, but not any less dynamic. I mean, that guy can fly, and he's got that change of direction that you can't teach. Rondale Moore from Purdue is an intriguing guy, and I'd be curious to see where he goes. And I think the offense that he gets into, Mike, much like really helped Hill and Mecole Hardman in Kansas City, the offense that Moore finds in the NFL will be big for his development.
Yeah, I mean, one more guy to mention, Dwayne Eskridge from Western Michigan. He's another one that, has popped up a little bit here and there, kind of connected to the Patriots. I mean, same kind of thing where, a little bit undersized, but, a lot of these guys have kickoff return potential, and they just are home run hitters. I mean, I think he averaged 20 yards a catch.
4 down guys, Mike, 4 down guys. I'm a little bit less high on Eskridge as some other people. And I know locally, our buddy Phil Perry has been talking about him a lot because of those things. He's a 4 down guy. He plays on special teams. He's a physical guy, high motor and all that stuff. And I think he's a good player. I'm not looking for a 4-down player in my wide receivers. I got to be honest with you. I want to get a guy who can win one-on-one matchups. That's what this offense has lacked over the last couple of years, in my opinion. I know there's been a lot on the quarterbacks, and rightly so last year. The quarterback was the number one problem, probably 1 to 10. But they also didn't have a lot of guys that could win those one-on-one matchups. I'd like to see some of those guys. The North Carolina kids, we really didn't talk about either. One is more of a slot guy in Daz Newsome. The other in De'Ami Brown, I think might be a little bit more in that, number 2 kind of range, maybe a good solid number 2 in a good offense. But big play opportunities with those guys. I think there's a lot to choose from. I really like this class, and I'd be disappointed if the Patriots didn't tap into it.
Yeah, well, they didn't tap into last year's class, and certainly with the departure of Edelman, it's a need. A lot of guys to choose from. Should be interesting all 3 days of the draft. We'll be back next week with some more previews here of the draft coming up. I'm Mike Dussault, Paul Perillo. Thanks for tuning in.